5-year-old girl collapses in a mansion, her tiny body convulsing as blood spreads across polished stone floors. The wealthy family freezes in shock, but it isn't her millionaire father who saves her. It's the black cleaning lady, a woman dismissed as invisible, who throws everything aside and races against death itself. With trembling hands, she lifts the child, rushes her into an old pickup truck, and speeds toward a hospital. The girl survives. But what looks like an act of courage hides a story far darker than anyone in that mansion could imagine. Behind the glittering wealth and marble halls lies a chain of corruption, racism, and greed that cost countless children their lives, including the cleaner's own son. What happens when one woman dares to expose it all? Monica Alvarez was no stranger to hard work. At 44 years old, she had spent most of her adult life cleaning houses that would never belong to her, polishing the surfaces of wealth while carrying the weight of her own grief in silence. Her life was stitched together with quiet strength, the kind of strength people rarely notice until it explodes into action. To the families she served, she was just another maid. To herself, she was a mother who had already faced the kind of loss no one should endure. Her son Daniel had been only 13 when asthma stole his life. It wasn't the illness itself that broke her. It was the way the system failed him. Doctors had turned him away, hospitals cut corners, and the equipment meant to save him didn't work. Monica buried him, knowing the truth. Daniel's death had been preventable. From that moment on, every breath she took was heavy with the memory of the child she couldn't save. When she was hired to work at the Whitmore estate, it felt like another chapter in the same story. The sprawling Atlanta mansion sat high on a hill, a place where silence echoed louder than voices, where wealth was displayed like armor. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, rooms so vast they seemed untouched by time. For Monica, it was a new workplace, but the same pattern. She was there to clean up after people who barely noticed her presence. The Whitmores were the kind of family whose name carried weight in every corner of the city. Charles Whitmore was a millionaire real estate mogul, known for his towering developments and relentless climb up the financial ladder. His wife, Catherine, was often abroad, floating in and out of Europe with her circle of wealthy friends. And then there was Sophia, their only daughter, just 5 years old. A child too young to understand the social lines drawn around her. A child who sometimes looked at Monica with curiosity instead of distance. Monica did her job quietly. She polished, she scrubbed, she picked up toys left behind in Sophia's playroom. To her co-workers, she was just another new hire. To the Whitmores, she was background noise. Yet Monica carried a past none of them knew. A past in which she had once been a nurse, trained in pediatrics with skills far beyond cleaning. She had lost that career after being labeled difficult, a woman who spoke out against unsafe practices and discrimination. Hospitals let her go, one after another, until her nursing license felt like a relic of a life that had been taken from her as surely as Daniel had. Still, she endured. She worked long hours, saved what she could, and tried to keep a low profile. But grief has a way of following a person, no matter how hard they try to bury it. Some nights, when the Whitmore mansion was quiet, Monica would pause in one of the endless hallways and feel the memory of Daniel pressing against her chest. She wondered if these people, with all their wealth, had ever felt the kind of helplessness she had known. Beneath the routines of dusting and mopping, tension simmered. Catherine's absence meant Monica rarely faced the woman's cutting remarks, but gossip among the staff hinted at how controlling she could be. Charles was consumed by business, rarely home except for late dinners and phone calls that echoed behind closed doors. Sophia was left in the care of nannies, teachers, and, in small stolen moments, Monica herself. To the outside world, it seemed like just another wealthy household. But inside those marble walls, cracks were already forming. Monica could sense it in the way staff whispered about hospital contracts, in the way Charles's tone hardened when discussing construction deals, in the way Catherine's name surfaced in conversations laced with disdain. Something darker lived beneath the surface of their glittering empire. though Monica couldn't yet see its full shape. What she did know was that her life, as quiet as it had become, was not finished. The pain of losing Daniel had left her with a determination that never faded. She couldn't bring her son back, but she carried him with her, in every room she cleaned, in every memory that surfaced when she least expected it. And then came the day that would change everything, the day when Sophia collapsed in front of her. In that moment, Monica would no longer be invisible. She would no longer be just a cleaner. Her past as a nurse, her loss as a mother, her instinct to save, all of it would collide in a single decision that would set off a chain of events no one in the Whitmore household could have imagined. For Monica, it was the beginning of a fight that reached far beyond the walls of that mansion. A fight not only for truth, but for justice. The moment Sophia's small body convulsed and her lips turned blue, Monica's world tilted. Training she hadn't used in years came flooding back. She cleared the girl's airway, tilted her head, and pressed against her chest to check for breath. The other staff panicked, frozen, waiting for instructions that never came. Monica didn't wait. She scooped Sophia up in her arms, her uniform stained with blood, and ran. The mansion gates seemed to stretch endlessly as she fumbled with her truck keys. The old pickup roared to life, coughing black smoke, but it moved fast enough to carry Sophia to the hospital. Monica's hands shook on the steering wheel as she whispered silent prayers. She remembered Daniel, his last breath, his body limp in her arms. This time she wouldn't lose. She refused. At the hospital, doctors rushed Sophia inside. Minutes felt like hours. Monica sat in the waiting room, her clothes marked by blood that wasn't hers, her mind spiraling between fear and determination. When the physicians finally confirmed that Sophia would survive, relief crashed over her. For the first time in years, she felt her knowledge, her instinct, her courage had made a difference. But the story didn't end with gratitude. Charles Whitmore stormed into the hospital, frantic from his board meeting, his expensive suit crumpled. He was told his daughter had been saved by the maid. For a brief moment, his polished exterior cracked. Thankfulness mingled with disbelief. He shook Monica's hand, called her a blessing, and promised she would never be forgotten. Yet even in his relief, Monica saw something else in his eyes. A discomfort, a hesitation, the kind of unease wealthy men feel when reminded that those they overlook could hold power over their lives. News of the event spread quickly among staff and family circles. Some praised Monica. Others whispered that she had overstepped her role, that it was reckless to rush a millionaire's daughter in a rusted pickup instead of waiting for paramedics. By the time Catherine Whitmore returned from Europe, those whispers had hardened into judgment. Catherine wasted no time turning gratitude into hostility. In hushed but venomous tones, she accused Monica of exploiting the situation, of trying to play hero for attention. To Catherine, the idea that a black maid had saved her daughter was not a miracle. It was an insult. Her words cut like blades, sharp with classism and racism. Monica listened, silent but steady, knowing that defending herself would only confirm the woman's contempt. Even Charles, who had once defended Monica, began to waver. His world depended on reputation, appearances, and Catherine's approval. At dinners, his tone cooled. In meetings, he avoided her gaze. Slowly, Monica felt the walls of the mansion closing in. The family she had saved no longer saw her as a hero. They saw her as a problem. But Monica had carried a loss too heavy to let arrogance crush her. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't lash out. Instead, she began to watch, to listen, to collect. Because beneath the mansion's polished exterior, she saw shadows moving. She learned that Charles wasn't only a real estate mogul. His empire stretched into the healthcare system itself. He sat on hospital boards, made deals that kept money flowing into his construction company. And those deals came at a cost. Cheap equipment, faulty machines, corners cut for profit. The very kind of equipment that had failed Daniel years before. The revelation hit Monica like a storm. Her son's death wasn't just a cruel twist of fate. It was the direct result of greed by people like Charles Whitmore. Suddenly, the mansion didn't feel like an employer's home. It felt like the center of everything she had lost. Monica's anger could have burned her alive, but she chose something colder, sharper. She reached out to Dr. Leonard Brooks, the pediatrician who had treated Sophia. Quietly, he confirmed her suspicions. Children across the state had died because of Whitmore-supplied machines. Parents begged for answers, but lawsuits vanished, paperwork was buried, and board members turned a blind eye. The corruption ran deep. For Monica, silence was no longer an option. She began recording conversations. She caught Catherine's friends making racist remarks at luncheons. She overheard Charles discussing fraudulent contracts over whiskey in his office. With the help of an investigator, Julia Hahn, she copied files straight from his computer. Contracts, invoices, hidden payments. Every piece of evidence was fuel for a fire she was determined to ignite. Nights at the mansion grew dangerous. Monica slipped into offices when no one was watching, memorized passwords, and copied drives. One mistake and she could be caught, fired, or even destroyed. But the risk didn't deter her. The truth had to come out no matter the cost. Her plan took shape. A website she would call the Whitmore Files. Every recording, every document, every piece of proof would be uploaded at once. The FBI, the press, the health department, no one would be able to ignore it. She built her case like a fortress, knowing once the walls broke, the flood would drown the Whitmores. The closer the deadline came, the tighter the air felt inside the mansion. Catherine's suspicion grew. Charles's temper flared in meetings. Staff avoided Monica, sensing something was about to erupt. But Monica pressed forward, assembling a 50-slide presentation that laid out the rot hidden beneath Atlanta's gleaming skyline. And then the day arrived. Charles entered a hospital boardroom, prepared to push through yet another batch of defective equipment. He thought it was just another meeting. But at exactly 2 p.m., every phone in the room lit up with breaking news. Headlines blazed across screens, voices shouted in panic, and the Whitmore name was about to shatter. At 2 o'clock sharp, the fortress of lies collapsed. Phones across the boardroom lit up with breaking news banners. Whitmore Construction exposed in hospital scandal. Charles's face drained of color as article after article appeared. Leaked documents, recordings, contracts with his signature scrawled in ink. The very men who once shook his hand now stared at him with horror. His voice cracked as he tried to speak, but the screens did not stop. Headlines screamed, defective equipment linked to deaths of 180 children. And then came the audio. Catherine's voice, cold and unmistakable, mocked staff with racist slurs. Charles's voice arranging kickbacks. His empire, once untouchable, was laid bare for the world. At the same hour, FBI agents swarmed the Whitmore offices. Boxes of files were seized, computers were carried out, and employees were questioned in the open. The proud glass building that symbolized power now looked like a crime scene. Cameras captured every second. By nightfall, the images would play across national television. In the hospital lobby, parents gathered. Faces etched with grief, some clutching photos of their children. Children who never came home. Their voices cracked as reporters shoved microphones forward. For years, they had begged to be heard. Now, finally, the world listened. At the center of it all stood Monica Alvarez. The woman once invisible in the Whitmore mansion was now the reason the truth could not be buried. Dr. Brooks stepped beside her at a press conference, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. He named Daniel Alvarez, the boy whose life had been stolen by faulty equipment. He named the parents who had buried their children too soon. And he named Monica as the one who had shown the courage the institutions lacked. As cameras turned to her, Monica stood still, her face calm but her chest rising with deep breaths. She had not sought fame, but she had sought justice. She spoke, her voice steady. My son Daniel died because of faulty equipment. For years, I cleaned the homes of those who profited from his death. Today, I clean their lies from the world. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Parents cried openly. Applause broke out from those who knew what this moment meant. But beyond the flash of cameras, the Whitmore's world crumbled in silence. Charles was escorted from his office in handcuffs. Once flanked by bodyguards and lawyers, he now walked a gauntlet of flashing cameras and screaming voices. His head was down, but the weight of his choices pressed heavier than the chains around his wrists. Catherine, stripped of her social standing, was cast out by the very circle that once adored her. The woman who sneered at Monica now found herself isolated, whispers trailing her every step. But the true climax was not in their downfall. It was in the faces of the grieving parents who finally saw accountability. 90 families stood shoulder to shoulder at a courthouse rally, holding photos of the children they had lost. Their unity sent a message more powerful than any headline. This was not just one woman's fight. It was the fight of every family crushed by indifference, every parent silenced by systems designed to protect the powerful. For Monica, standing among them, the moment was almost unbearable. She thought of Daniel's last moments, of the wheeze in his chest, of the broken machines that could not save him. She thought of how helpless she had felt, and how powerless the world had told her she was. And now, she looked at a sea of parents and realized she was not powerless. She had turned her grief into a weapon sharper than any blade, the truth. The consequences unfolded swiftly. Whitmore's empire collapsed within days. Stockholders fled. Contracts dissolved. Investigations spread to every corner of his business. What began as whispers in mansion hallways had now become a storm that swept through courts, hospitals, and boardrooms alike. The man who once decided the fate of hospitals now had his fate decided by federal judges. Yet, amidst the downfall, Sophia, the little girl Monica had saved, watched her world unravel. Once shielded by privilege, she now bore the shame of her parents' actions. At school, whispers followed her. Friends pulled away. She became another casualty of her parents' greed, her childhood marked by disgrace. The climax was devastating in scope. Families broken, reputations destroyed, lives forever changed. And yet, within the ruin, there was a fragile thread of hope. For the first time, those who had been voiceless were heard. For the first time, the powerful trembled before the truth. As Monica left the press conference that evening, the crowd parted. Parents reached for her hands, thanking her, blessing her. She carried their touch like armor, every hand a reminder that Daniel's death had not been in vain. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with bruised colors, purple, red, fading into black. Monica looked up, her heart heavy yet unbroken. The fight was not over. The trials were still to come. The reforms had yet to be made. But the world was finally watching. And as the flash of cameras followed her into the night, one thought lingered in every mind. If one maid could bring down an empire, what else could the truth destroy? The fall of the Whitmores shook Atlanta. In a matter of weeks, the family's name, once synonymous with power and prestige, became a symbol of greed, corruption, and cruelty. Charles Whitmore faced trial on charges of fraud, corruption, and even manslaughter. His lawyers tried to spin excuses, but the mountain of evidence Monica and her allies had assembled was unshakable. After months of hearings, he was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The man who once dined with governors and sat on hospital boards now stared at the world through iron bars. Catherine fared no better. Her voice, captured in racist recordings, stripped her of the social standing she had clung to all her life. Once adored by her wealthy friends, she found herself unwelcome at the parties and galas that had defined her existence. Whispers followed her everywhere until, eventually, she disappeared from public view altogether. The woman who once scorned Monica could no longer hold her head high. Their daughter Sophia carried a quieter burden. Though innocent, she bore the consequences of her parents' choices. Children at school mocked her, parents pulled their kids away, and the Whitmore name became a stain she could not scrub off. Sophia was still the little girl Monica had saved, but the world she returned to after that hospital visit was fractured forever. For Monica, the resolution was not about revenge. It was about transformation. The pain of losing Daniel had once threatened to hollow her out, but now it became the foundation of her purpose. The Department of Health recognized her knowledge and courage, hiring her as a consultant. She worked on new safety protocols to ensure that public hospitals would never again be equipped with defective machines. They called it the Daniel Alvarez Protocol, a set of rules guaranteeing that the poorest families would receive the same quality of care as the richest. The name Daniel Alvarez, once spoken only in grief, now appeared on hospital plaques, training manuals, and legislation. For Monica, it was bittersweet. She had lost her son, but his story would protect thousands of children who might otherwise have shared his fate. Her mission didn't stop there. With the support of grieving parents and allies like Dr. Brooks, she founded the Daniel Alvarez Institute for Medical Justice. The institute became a watchdog, investigating hospital negligence, exposing dangerous practices, and giving families a voice. At its opening ceremony, parents, doctors, and lawmakers filled the hall. On stage, Monica stood before a crowd that rose to its feet in a 3-minute standing ovation. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything she had endured. Real wealth isn't measured in money. It's measured in truth and courage. The applause shook the room. Parents wept. Reporters scribbled her words. And for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause and recognize the power of one woman's determination. The legacy grew. Across Georgia, 12 public hospitals engraved Daniel's name at their entrances. Every time a child walked through those doors, his memory lived on as a shield of protection. Charles Whitmore's name, meanwhile, survived only in criminal records and court transcripts. The contrast was stark. One name remembered for greed and cruelty, the other for sacrifice and justice. Yet Monica never let her story become only about herself. She reminded people again and again that her pain was shared by countless families. Racism and corruption had not ended with the Whitmores. The systems that had failed Daniel were still alive, still dangerous, still in need of vigilance. Her institute was only one step, but it was a step born from courage. And this is where the story reaches beyond Monica, beyond Atlanta, beyond the walls of that mansion. It forces us to ask, how many lives are still being cut short because of greed? How many families are still silenced because of race, class, or power? And how many more Daniel Alvarez's will there be before people refuse to look away? Monica's journey reminds us that injustice thrives in silence, and silence is a choice. She chose courage instead, and in doing so, she proved that even those that society tries to erase can change the world. So as you leave this story behind, ask yourself, when you see injustice, will you stay silent, or will you speak? Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice, one act of courage, to bring down an empire. You've just heard the story of Monica Alvarez, a woman who turned her pain into power and exposed the corruption that cost countless children their lives. Her courage brought down an empire, but it also raises a question. What part of her journey struck you the most? Was it the moment she saved Sophia, or the fight to honor Daniel's name? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more.